Prerogative. By Jack London. This is the story of a man who did not appreciate his wife, also, of a woman who did him too great an honor when she gave herself to him. Incidentally, it concerns a Jesuit priest who had never been known to lie. He was an appurtenance, and a very necessary one, to the Yukon country, but the presence of the other two was merely accidental. They were specimens of the many strange waifs which ride the breast of a gold rush or come tailing along behind. Edwin Bentham and Grace Bentham were waifs. They were also tailing along behind, for the Klondike rush of '97 had long since swept down the great river and subsided into the famine-stricken city of Dawson. When the Yukon shut up shop and went to sleep under a 3-foot ice sheet, this peripatetic couple found themselves at the Five Finger Rapids, with the city of gold still a journey of many sleeps to the north. Many cattle had been butchered at this place in the fall of the year, and the offal made a goodly heap. The three fellow voyagers of Edwin Bentham and wife gazed upon this deposit, did a little mental arithmetic, caught a certain glimpse of a bonanza, and decided to remain. And all winter they sold sacks of bones and frozen hides to the famished dog teams. It was a modest price they asked, $1 a pound, just as it came. 6 months later, when the sun came back and the Yukon awoke, they buckled on their heavy money belts and journeyed back to the Southland, where they yet live and lie mightily about the Klondike they never saw. But Edwin Bentham, he was an indolent fellow, and had he not been possessed of a wife, would have gladly joined issue in the dog meat speculation. As it was, she played upon his vanity, told him how great and strong he was, how a man such as he certainly was could overcome all obstacles and of a surety obtain the golden fleece. So he squared his jaw, sold his share in the bones and hides for a sled and 1 dog, and turned his snowshoes to the north. Needless to state, Grace Bentham's snowshoes never allowed his tracks to grow cold. Nay, ere their tribulations had seen 3 days, it was the man who followed in the rear, and the woman who broke trail in advance. Of course, if anybody hove in sight, the position was instantly reversed. Thus did his manhood remain virgin to the travelers who passed like ghosts on the silent trail. There are such men in this world. How such a man and such a woman came to take each other for better and for worse is unimportant to this narrative. These things are familiar to us all, and those people who do them, or even question them too closely, are apt to lose a beautiful faith which is known as eternal fitness. Edwin Bentham was a boy, thrust by mischance into a man's body, a boy who could complacently pluck a butterfly, wing from wing, or cower in abject terror before a lean, nervy fellow, not half his size. He was a selfish cry-baby, hidden behind a man's mustache and stature, and glossed over with a skin-deep veneer of culture and conventionality. Yes, he was a clubman and a society man, the sort that grace social functions and utter inanities with a charm and unction which is indescribable, the sort that talk big, and cry over a toothache, the sort that put more hell into a woman's life by marrying her than can the most graceless libertine that ever browsed in forbidden pastures. We meet these men every day, but we rarely know them for what they are. Second to marrying them, the best way to get this knowledge is to eat out of the same pot and crawl under the same blanket with them for, well, say a week. No greater margin is necessary. To see Grace Bentham, was to see a slender, girlish creature. To know her, was to know a soul which dwarfed your own, yet retained all the elements of the eternal feminine. This was the woman who urged and encouraged her husband in his Northland quest, who broke trail for him when no one was looking, and cried in secret over her weakling woman's body. So journeyed this strangely assorted couple down to old Fort Selkirk, then through 50 miles of dismal wilderness to Stewart River. And when the short day left them, and the man lay down in the snow and blubbered, it was the woman who lashed him to the sled, bit her lips with the pain of her aching limbs, and helped the dog haul him to Malamute Kid's cabin. Malamute Kid was not at home, but Myers, the German trader, cooked great moose steaks and shook up a bed of fresh pine boughs. Lake, Langham, and Parker were excited, and not unduly so when the cause was taken into account. "Oh, Sandy. Say, can you tell a porterhouse from around? Come out and lend us a hand, anyway. This appeal emanated from the cache, where Langham was vainly struggling with diverse quarters of frozen moose. "Don't you budge from those dishes," commanded Parker. "I say, Sandy, there's a good fellow just run down to the Missouri camp and borrow some cinnamon," begged Lake. "Oh. Oh. Hurry up." "Why don't dash?" But the crash of meat and boxes, in the cache, abruptly quenched this peremptory summons. "Come now, Sandy, it won't take a minute to go down to the Missouri dash." "You leave him alone," interrupted Parker. "How am I to mix the biscuits if the table isn't cleared off?" Sandy paused in indecision, till suddenly the fact that he was Langham's man dawned upon him. Then he apologetically threw down the greasy dishcloth, and went to his master's rescue. These promising scions of wealthy progenitors had come to the Northland in search of laurels, with much money to burn, and a man apiece. Luckily for their souls, the other two men were up the White River in search of a mythical quartz ledge, so Sandy had to grin under the responsibility of 3 healthy masters, each of whom was possessed of peculiar cookery ideas. Twice that morning had a disruption of the whole camp been imminent, only averted by immense concessions from one or the other of these knights of the chafing dish. But at last their mutual creation, a really dainty dinner, was completed. Then they sat down to a 3-cornered game of cutthroat, a proceeding which did away with all casus belli for future hostilities, and permitted the victor to depart on a most important mission. This fortune fell to Parker, who parted his hair in the middle, put on his mittens and bearskin cap, and stepped over to Malamute Kid's cabin. And when he returned, it was in the company of Grace Bentham and Malamute Kid, the former very sorry her husband could not share with her their hospitality, for he had gone up to look at the Henderson Creek mines, and the latter still a trifle stiff from breaking trail down the Stewart River. Myers had been asked, but had declined, being deeply engrossed in an experiment of raising bread from hops. Well, they could do without the husband, but a woman why they had not seen one all winter, and the presence of this one promised a new era in their lives. They were college men and gentlemen, these 3 young fellows, yearning for the flesh pots they had been so long denied. Probably Grace Bentham suffered from a similar hunger, at least, it meant much to her, the first bright hour in many weeks of darkness. But that wonderful first course, which claimed the versatile Lake for its parent, had no sooner been served than there came a loud knock at the door. "Oh. Ah. Won't you come in, Mr. Bentham?" said Parker, who had stepped to see who the newcomer might be. "Is my wife here?" gruffly responded that worthy. "Why, yes. We left word with Mr. Myers." Parker was exerting his most dulcet tones, inwardly wondering what the deuce it all meant. "Won't you come in? Expecting you at any moment, we reserved a place. And just in time for the first course, too." "Come in, Edwin, dear," chirped Grace Bentham from her seat at the table. Parker naturally stood aside. "I want my wife," reiterated Bentham hoarsely, the intonation savoring disagreeably of ownership. Parker gasped, was within an ace of driving his fist into the face of his boorish visitor, but held himself awkwardly in check. Everybody rose. Lake lost his head and caught himself on the verge of saying, "Must you go?" Then began the farrago of leave-taking. "So nice of you dash, I am awfully sorry, by Jove. How things did brighten dash, really now, you dash. Thank you ever so much dash, nice trip to Dawson dash, etc., etc." In this wise the lamb was helped into her jacket and led to the slaughter. Then the door slammed, and they gazed woefully upon the deserted table. Damn! Langham had suffered disadvantages in his early training, and his oaths were weak and monotonous. "Damn," he repeated, vaguely conscious of the incompleteness and vainly struggling for a more virile term. It is a clever woman who can fill out the many weak places in an inefficient man, by her own indomitability, reinforce his vacillating nature, infuse her ambitious soul into his, and spur him on to great achievements. And it is indeed a very clever and tactful woman who can do all this, and do it so subtly that the man receives all the credit and believes in his inmost heart that everything is due to him and him alone. This is what Grace Bentham proceeded to do. Arriving in Dawson with a few pounds of flour and several letters of introduction, she at once applied herself to the task of pushing her big baby to the fore. It was she who melted the stony heart and wrung credit from the rude barbarian who presided over the destiny of the P.C. Company, yet it was Edwin Bentham to whom the concession was ostensibly granted. It was she who dragged her baby up and down creeks, over benches and divides, and on a dozen wild stampedes, yet everybody remarked what an energetic fellow that Bentham was. It was she who studied maps, and catechized miners, and hammered geography and locations into his hollow head, till everybody marveled at his broad grasp of the country and knowledge of its conditions. Of course, they said the wife was a brick, and only a few wise ones appreciated and pitied the brave little woman. She did the work, he got the credit and reward. In the Northwest Territory a married woman cannot stake or record a creek, bench, or quartz claim, so Edwin Bentham went down to the Gold Commissioner and filed on bench claim 23, second tier, of French Hill. And when April came they were washing out $1,000 a day, with many, many such days in prospect. At the base of French Hill lay Eldorado Creek, and on a creek claim stood the cabin of Clyde Wharton. At present he was not washing out a diurnal $1,000, but his dumps grew, shift by shift, and there would come a time when those dumps would pass through his sluice boxes, depositing in the riffles, in the course of half a dozen days, several $100,000. He often sat in that cabin, smoked his pipe, and dreamed beautiful little dreams in which neither the dumps nor the half-ton of dust in the P.C. Company's big safe played a part. And Grace Bentham, as she washed tin dishes in her hillside cabin, often glanced down into Eldorado Creek, and dreamed not of dumps nor dust, however. They met frequently, as the trail to the one claim crossed the other, and there is much to talk about in the Northland spring, but never once, by the light of an eye nor the slip of a tongue, did they speak their hearts. This is as it was at first. But one day Edwin Bentham was brutal. All boys are thus. Besides, being a French Hill king now, he began to think a great deal of himself and to forget all he owed to his wife. On this day, Wharton heard of it, and waylaid Grace Bentham, and talked wildly. This made her very happy, though she would not listen, and made him promise to not say such things again. Her hour had not come. But the sun swept back on its northern journey, the black of midnight changed to the steely color of dawn, the snow slipped away, the water dashed again over the glacial drift, and the wash-up began. Day and night the yellow clay and scraped bedrock hurried through the swift sluices, yielding up its ransom to the strong men from the Southland. And in that time of tumult came Grace Bentham's hour. To all of us such hours at some time come, that is, to us who are not too phlegmatic. Some people are good, not from inherent love of virtue, but from sheer laziness. But those of us who know weak moments may understand. Edwin Bentham was weighing dust over the bar of the saloon at the Forks. Altogether too much of his dust went over that pine board when his wife came down the hill and slipped into Clyde Wharton's cabin. Wharton was not expecting her, but that did not alter the case. And much subsequent misery in idle waiting might have been avoided, had not Father Roubaud seen this and turned aside from the main creek trail. My child, hold on, Father Roubaud. Though I'm not of your faith, I respect you, but you can't come in between this woman and me. You know what you are doing? No. Were you God Almighty, ready to fling me into eternal fire, I'd bank my will against yours in this matter. Wharton had placed Grace on a stool and stood belligerently before her. You sit down on that chair and keep quiet, he continued, addressing the Jesuit. I'll take my innings now. You can have yours after. Father Roubaud bowed courteously and obeyed. He was an easygoing man and had learned to bide his time. Wharton pulled a stool alongside the woman's, smothering her hand in his. Then you do care for me, and will take me away? Her face seemed to reflect the peace of this man, against whom she might draw close for shelter. "Dear, don't you remember what I said before?" "Of course I dash, but how can you, the wash-up? Do you think that worries? Anyway, I'll give the job to Father Roubaud, here. I can trust him to safely bank the dust with the company. To think of it, I'll never see him again. A blessing. And to go, oh, Clyde, I can't. I can't." There, of course you can. Just let me plan it, you see, as soon as we get a few traps together, we'll start, and dash, suppose he comes back. I'll break every dash, no. No fighting, Clyde. Promise me that. All right. I'll just tell the men to throw him off the claim. They've seen how he's treated you, and haven't much love for him. You mustn't do that. You mustn't hurt him. What then? Let him come right in here and take you away before my eyes. No, oh, she half whispered, stroking his hand softly. Then let me run it, and don't worry. I'll see he doesn't get hurt. Precious lot he cared whether you got hurt or not. We won't go back to Dawson. I'll send word down for a couple of the boys to outfit and pull a boat up the Yukon. We'll cross the divide and raft down the Indian River to meet them. Then dash and then. Her head was on his shoulder. Their voices sank to softer cadences, each word a caress. The Jesuit fidgeted nervously. And then, she repeated. Why, we'll pull up, and portage the White Horse Rapids and the Box Cannon. Yes. And the 60-mile river, then the lakes, Chilkoot, Dyea, and salt water. But, dear, I can't pull a boat. You little goose. I'll get Sitka Charlie, he knows all the good water and best camps, and he is the best traveler I ever met, if he is an Indian. All you'll have to do, is to sit in the middle of the boat, and sing songs, and play Cleopatra, and fight. No, we're in luck, too early for mosquitoes. And then, oh my Antony. And then a steamer, San Francisco, and the world. Never to come back to this cursed hole again. Think of it. The world, and ours to choose from. I'll sell out. Why, we're rich. The Waldworth Syndicate will give me $500,000 for what's left in the ground, and I've got twice as much in the dumps and with the P.C. Company. We'll go to the fair in Paris in 1900. We'll go to Jerusalem, if you say so. We'll buy an Italian palace, and you can play Cleopatra to your heart's content. No, you shall be Lucretia, act, or anybody your little heart sees fit to become. But you mustn't, you really mustn't dash, the wife of Caesar shall be above reproach. Of course, but I won't be your wife, will I, dear? I didn't mean that. But you'll love me just as much, and never even think, oh. I know you'll be like other men, you'll grow tired, and dash. How can you? I dash, promise me. Yes, I do promise. You say it so easily, dear, but how do you know, or I know? I have so little to give, yet it is so much, and all I have. Oh, Clyde. Promise me you won't. There. You mustn't begin to doubt already. Till death do us part, you know. Think. I once said that to him, and now. And now, little sweetheart, you're not to bother about such things any more. Of course, I never will, and for the first time, lips trembled against lips. Father Roubaud had been watching the main trail through the window, but could stand the strain no longer. He cleared his throat and turned around. Your turn now, father. Wharton's face was flushed with the fire of his first embrace. There was an exultant ring to his voice as he abdicated in the other's favor. He had no doubt as to the result. Neither had Grace, for a smile played about her mouth as she faced the priest. My child, he began, my heart bleeds for you. It is a pretty dream, but it cannot be. And why, Father? I have said yes. You knew not what you did. You did not think of the oath you took, before your God, to that man who is your husband. It remains for me to make you realize the sanctity of such a pledge. And if I do realize, and yet refuse? Then God. Which God? My husband has a God which I care not to worship. There must be many such. Child. Unsay those words. Ah. You do not mean them. I understand. I, too, have had such moments. For an instant he was back in his native France, and a wistful, sad-eyed face came as a mist between him and the woman before him. Then, Father, has my God forsaken me? I am not wicked above women. My misery with him has been great. Why should it be greater? Why shall I not grasp at happiness? I cannot, will not, go back to him. Rather is your God forsaken. Return. Throw your burden upon him, and the darkness shall be lifted. O my child, no, it is useless, I have made my bed and so shall I lie. I will go on. And if God punishes me, I shall bear it somehow. You do not understand. You are not a woman. My mother was a woman. But and Christ was born of a woman. She did not answer. A silence fell. Wharton pulled his mustache impatiently and kept an eye on the trail. Grace leaned her elbow on the table, her face set with resolve. The smile had died away. Father Roubaud shifted his ground. You have children. At one time I wished but now no. And I am thankful. And a mother? Yes. She loves you. Yes. Her replies were whispers. And a brother, no matter, he is a man. But a sister? Her head drooped a quavering yes. Younger? Very much. 7 years. And you have thought well about this matter? About them? About your mother? And your sister? She stands on the threshold of her woman's life, and this wildness of yours may mean much to her. Could you go before her, look upon her fresh young face, hold her hand in yours, or touch your cheek to hers? To his words, her brain formed vivid images, till she cried out, "Don't! Don't!" and shrank away as do the wolf dogs from the lash. But you must face all this, and better it is to do it now. In his eyes, which she could not see, there was a great compassion, but his face, tense and quivering, showed no relenting. She raised her head from the table, forced back the tears, struggled for control. I shall go away. They will never see me, and come to forget me. I shall be to them as dead. Anne and I will go with Clyde today. It seemed final. Wharton stepped forward, but the priest waved him back. You have wished for children. A silent yes. And prayed for them? Often. And have you thought, if you should have children? Father Roubaud's eyes rested for a moment on the man by the window. A quick light shot across her face. Then the full import dawned upon her. She raised her hand appealingly, but he went on. Can you picture an innocent babe in your arms, a boy? The world is not so hard upon a girl. Why, your very breast would turn to gall. And you could be proud and happy of your boy, as you looked on other children, oh, have pity. Hush. A scapegoat. Don't. Don't. I will go back. She was at his feet. A child to grow up with no thought of evil, and one day the world to fling a tender name in his face. A child to look back and curse you from whose loins he sprang. Oh my God! My God! She groveled on the floor. The priest sighed and raised her to her feet. Wharton pressed forward, but she motioned him away. Don't come near me, Clyde. I am going back. The tears were coursing pitifully down her face, but she made no effort to wipe them away. After all this? You cannot. I will not let you. Don't touch me. She shivered and drew back. I will. You are mine. Do you hear? You are mine. Then he whirled upon the priest. Oh, what a fool I was to ever let you wag your silly tongue. Thank your God you are not a common man, for but the priestly prerogative must be exercised, eh? Well, you have exercised it. Now get out of my house, or I'll forget who and what you are. Father Roubaud bowed, took her hand, and started for the door. But Wharton cut them off. Grace! You said you loved me. I did. And you do now. I do. Say it again. I do love you, Clyde, I do. There, you priest, he cried. You have heard it, and with those words on her lips you would send her back to live a lie and a hell with that man. But Father Roubaud whisked the woman into the inner room and closed the door. No words, he whispered to Wharton, as he struck a casual posture on a stool. Remember, for her sake, he added. The room echoed to a rough knock at the door, the latch raised and Edwin Bentham stepped in. Seen anything of my wife? He asked as soon as salutations had been exchanged. Two heads nodded negatively. I saw her tracks down from the cabin, he continued tentatively, and they broke off, just opposite here, on the main trail. His listeners looked bored. And I thought dash. She was here, thundered Wharton. The priest silenced him with a look. Did you see her tracks leading up to this cabin, my son? Wily Father Roubaud he had taken good care to obliterate them as he came up the same path an hour before. I didn't stop to look, his eyes rested suspiciously on the door to the other room, then interrogated the priest. The latter shook his head, but the doubt seemed to linger. Father Roubaud breathed a swift, silent prayer, and rose to his feet. If you doubt me, why he made as though to open the door. A priest could not lie. Edwin Bentham had heard this often, and believed it. Of course not, Father, he interposed hurriedly. I was only wondering where my wife had gone, and thought maybe I guess she's up at Mrs. Stanton's on French Gulch. Nice weather, isn't it? Heard the news. Flowers gone down to $40 a hundred, and they say the Chechaquos are flocking down the river in droves. But I must be going, so goodbye. The door slammed, and from the window they watched him take his quest up French Gulch. A few weeks later, just after the June high water, two men shot a canoe into midstream and made fast to a derelict pine. This tightened the painter and jerked the frail craft along as would a towboat. Father Roubaud had been directed to leave the upper country and return to his swarthy children at Minooq. The white men had come among them, and they were devoting too little time to fishing, and too much to a certain deity whose transient habitat was in countless black bottles. Malamute Kid also had business in the lower country, so they journeyed together. But one, in all the Northland, knew the man Paul Roubaud, and that man was Malamute Kid. Before him alone did the priest cast off the sacerdotal garb and stand naked. And why not? These two men knew each other. Had they not shared the last morsel of fish, the last pinch of tobacco, the last and inmost thought, on the barren stretches of Bering Sea, in the heartbreaking mazes of the Great Delta, on the terrible winter journey from Point Barrow to the Porcupine? Father Roubaud puffed heavily at his trail-worn pipe, and gazed on the reddest sun, poised somberly on the edge of the northern horizon. Malamute Kid wound up his watch. It was midnight. Cheer up, old man. The kid was evidently gathering up a broken thread. God surely will forgive such a lie. Let me give you the word of a man who strikes a true note. If she have spoken a word, remember thy lips are sealed, and the brand of the dog is upon him by whom is the secret revealed. If there be trouble to her ward, and a lie of the blackest can clear, lie, while thy lips can move or a man is alive to hear. Father Roubaud removed his pipe and reflected. The man speaks true, but my soul is not vexed with that. The lie and the penance stand with God, but dash. What then? Your hands are clean. Not so. Kid, I have thought much, and yet the thing remains. I knew, and made her go back. The clear note of a robin rang out from the wooden bank, a partridge drummed the call in the distance, a moose lunged noisily in the eddy, but the twain smoked on in silence.